We're on Instagram now, eh? Let's see. I'm gonna watch myself.
Are we already on?
I think we're on.
God, you're gonna watch yourself?
Yeah, I'm gonna watch myself. I
I'll
wanna
put
see
the
how...
reflection directly there so I can just tune into the reflection.
Oh, we're in. We're live.
See, what I would do for you?
We're live.
What I would make you do is if this was a tariqah, I would cut you off. I would cut you off from all communication for a week.
So, that's cultish behavior, Dr. Ghilan. What's happening? Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to another episode of Boys in the Cave. My name is Tanzim and I'm joined by our regular co-host Josh and also joined by our dear friend Rafael as our guest co-host today. So people, would have checked out your episode as well. I think it was like 6 episodes ago with the conversion story, alhamdulillah.
If you haven't, then go to so.
Definitely. Yeah, inshallah. But listen to this one first, inshallah, and then maybe afterwards.
Bit of context for you guys.
Exactly.
Why is a strange voice?
You're not reading.
Yeah, I'm not reading it. So I have these notes, but I got impromptu, but I have something there just to make sure I don't blank out. It gets nervous, it depends on the guest.
All right.
But
it's
to
a
give,
podcast,
but to start, before going to our guest, I have to give some shout outs because a lot of setup here, as you guys might see. So alhamdulillah, with the tremendous response that our podcast has received in the past few months, as well as the immense faith that the viewers have shown in us throughout their donations, we're now more passionate than ever before to deliver great content to you guys. So we have many plans and objectives, which we'll slowly bring to the fore as time progresses. But for now, one of the biggest changes is that we have made improvements to our Patreon page. The whole page has been revamped with new tires, new descriptions and an updated goals list. If you're yet to visit Patreon, please do so, as you can find all types of exclusive content there, as well as a chance to support the work that we do. So we have, ties for things such as Google Hangouts with the team, send your own questions, which is only available to those who donate. So visit patreon.com/boysinthecave. Our guest is looking at me. I think he wants a shout out of his Patreon page, but we'll do that later.
No.
No. He's like, oh man, what's happening here? I'm getting out. But anyways, I'll make a comparison. So there's another Patreon account. I listen to another podcast called Philosophize This. That podcast gets roughly $15,000 a month. They get roughly one episode, $7,500 a month. Per episode, sorry. They get $7,500.
So they get 2 episodes a month.
Yeah. Wow. So literally, this is what angers me, right? The description. The description literally says, all Patreon support will first go towards allowing me to eat something other than top ramen most days, and beyond that will go towards improving the show. So the guy's literally using it to live off, and everyone knows that because it's in his description, it's blatant, but people are still donating.
But
right?
do you know why?
Why?
Because they're benefiting from the content.
Yeah. That's alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
That I don't know, alhamdulillah, but that's good. It's good. But I'm saying as a Muslim podcast, when we have the haqq, we should be doing that with our, for us, you know what I mean?
Man.
No, I'm just saying for the haqq, you get me? So inshallah, I'm not asking to do big donations, just, $1 a month, because that's why, it helps. Yeah, it builds up essentially. So obviously not to their level of philosophize this.
In all fairness, I think the problem with a lot of Muslims, the way that we approach this stuff, is we don't recognize how much work really goes into preparing these things. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes resources. You have to pay for hosting fees. You have to, all this stuff costs money. And when you guys have to, and you also have to live somehow. So it's either you go and get jobs and do other things and barely manage to do this, halfway,
stuff,
or if you get people to support you so that you can dedicate your time to just doing this work. And if people are benefiting from it, I think they should show that appreciation through just these small monetary kind of donations. And it's not much, it's, if you get 15,000 listeners, each one just giving you $1.
Exactly.
You get there. And, I think, today I went to One Path and I was really impressed with the studio and the way that they got it set up and things. If we have, I think it was not Imam al-Ghazali, the Imam, but Sheikh al-Ghazali, the one who died in 1996. I think he's the one who said, Islam, the best case with the worst lawyers. Or Islam, the best merchandise with the worst salespeople. We just don't know how to really present it in a way that's professional, that's really top tier. And when it comes to asking for resources to do that, we don't seem to get as much feedback from people to do that. I don't know what it is. I wish I knew. But yeah. I don't think you should be shy for asking people. You need to ask people. I mean, a lot of marketers will tell you, ask. If you don't ask, you're not going to get anything.
Exactly.
So you just have to ask and not be shy about it. This stuff costs money, and people need to recognize that. And if they appreciate the content and they learn from it, please support it.
Yeah, and just not even just how much money goes into, but just the effort. It's like a trade-off thing. So we can, use it as savings, and later when some stuff happen, inshallah, like that can cover.
Yeah.
And we're not asking for much. Literally, you said like if that 1,000 viewers, $1 a month, that builds up. So inshallah, you can support us through that way. And Mohamed Ghilan has his own Patreon account as well.
I gotta push you back on this. You are spending time. You're exerting effort on your own part. You're preparing. You have a document. That's why I kept reading. It's like you're sitting and spending time preparing a document. People need to value this. There's value to this time. So people can't just expect that all of it is just like free willy-nilly, and then you can just starve on the street. One thing that really bothers me is Muhsin Khan, the translator of the Quran. I think if I got the right...
Yes, he's one of the translators.
I think if I got the right person, he died in a very poor apartment in England. Like, this is one of the greatest contributors to the Islamic tradition and spreading it. And the way that he passes away is not really becoming for us as a community to treat somebody like that in that manner. And so when it comes, we elevate artists and we elevate celebrities, and what are they doing? They're spending their time to bounce around and dance in front of us or give us a presentation of some show or whatever, or play some, or shoot some basketballs through a hoop, or that's it. That's really what they're doing. Great skill, great, that's fine, but they're exerting their effort to do that and they're perfecting it. When it comes to intellectual content, when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's first command, and you're really answering that first command and exercising it, you're applying it in this way, what are we showing as an appreciation for that? This stuff costs money, man. It's Al-Jahid's, when somebody did a calculation of what Al-Jahid, this great scholar in the Islamic tradition, he's a Mu'tazili. His name was Al-Jahid. They said one of the reasons was because his eyes popped out from how much he was reading. And one of the ways that he died, one of the narrations that he died underneath his books, his library fell on top of him.
Oh my God.
But he was getting a stipend of what was equivalent to $30,000 a month, just to be a scholar, just to read and write, and just produce intellectual content. That's really what he was doing.
And it's not like, that's not what his worth is, or that's not what his value is.
No.
Much more so than other
much more so.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to teachers, scholars, imams, all of these people that we want them to serve the community and see, the thing is, we cry about how we don't have scholars who are, where are the scholars? Where are the high caliber people who can dedicate their time? Where are you? Like, are you supporting these people? It takes time to sit and read and to write and to produce this stuff. And if I need to put food on the table and take care of a family, and I don't have resources, then I'm forced to go out and work. Well, that's time away from me studying and reading and writing and doing these things. So when we ask for people to support our Patreon accounts or to join book clubs or whatever, that's actually what it's about. It's to help us continue to produce this. And if you think it's valuable, I know this sounds like I'm berating the Muslim community, and I don't mean it to come across like that, but it really hurts me to find out that there is some real potential with some really upcoming podcasts, One Path, all of these efforts that we have, and the community is not really giving their all behind them. Meanwhile, the example you cited with Philosophize This,
yeah,
or you have Joe Rogan, or you have Sam Harris, this guy, this incoherent intellectual fraud, getting $10,000 a month to produce vitriol on his podcast. You have Jordan Peterson, who's really like a one-trick pony, if you really look at what he's talking about. And he's getting the same thing over and over again. And he's getting what's his Patreon account is at now? $75,000 a month or something like that? It's insane. And people are paying for that. Why are they paying for that? Because they're hungry for that type of content, and they're looking for water. But they're seeing a mirage, and they think that that's where the source of water is going to be. So I think we together have to come and basically support these types of efforts if we really believe that this is going to help people out there. Sorry, I took some time.
No, it's all good. Like, my version of it is just a rant, but Dr. Ghilan's like articulating and like smaller. He's like a salesman. SubhanAllah. But yeah, just another shout out is to Mizan Avenue for giving Boys in the Cave time to record an episode with Dr. Ghilan. So people watching this on our Facebook live, maybe later on. Dr. Ghilan is actually doing an event tomorrow and the day after Mizan Avenue. Saturday, he's doing a talk on the love of the Prophet ﷺ, and Ahbab al-Mustafa will be there as well. On Sunday, he's doing an intensive from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. A text called The Reliever Al-Munfajira. Farija. Sorry. Yeah.
The way you pronounce it, it means the one that pulls up.
So I'm just going to leave the show now.
Yeah, the SWAT team's on its way in.
Subhanallah.
The counterterrorism, bro.
Oh man, I'm at a fool myself. Anyways, tickets actually on Mizan Avenue's page, so check it out inshallah if you live in Sydney. Another last shout out to Islam Sat channel that helped us with this today's setup with the live stream. So they're an Islamic TV channel based in Sydney, Australia. They got broadcasting and streaming online 24/7. For more info on the channel, check them out on Facebook, inshallah. So last shout out to Green Square Masjid for letting us use their space, alhamdulillah. So
And that's the podcast.
yeah, that's it. We're getting out of here, alhamdulillah. So on to our special guest and dear friend. So obviously you guys are familiar with his, talks and videos online. He has a PhD in neuroscience. I'm currently studying medicine at University of Queensland. He's the first, you said you're the first, we're the first podcast to do a live interview, right? Like not live, but in person. Like you haven't done other podcasts where you went.
I haven't actually sat down personally. Yeah, you guys are. This is the second time we do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the only podcast I managed to go personally.
And yeah, like we're breaking records here at Boys.
MashaAllah,
yeah. We'll revolutionize the dawah scene, yeah. So, this is actually, what's scary, it's freaky. It's like, this will actually be our 25th podcast. So, you are our first guest on the show. And now it's like the 25th. It's like a down memory lane. Like, we can reminisce on our journey, because we started off with you. So, yeah. Wow. It's pretty deep, eh? It got sentimental.
It's an honor, man.
It's about a year ago. I think it was September last year.
Yeah, it's exactly a year. So, like, I think
Dr. Ghilan came down September last year.
15 days from now, will be exactly a year we started. Something like that. Yeah. So, assalamu alaikum, Dr. Ghilan. Welcome home to Boys in the Cave. Welcome back home. So,
Welcome back to the cave.
SubhanAllah. So, we spent a day with you already, alhamdulillah. How's it been so far? Because you touched down this morning, right?
Yeah.
And yeah,
it was good. I'm loving Sydney more and more that I come to it. Got to spend some time with that One Path Studios.
What did you do? Did you do something for them, or did you just check out? The studio?
We did. We checked out the studio, and then we sat down and we recorded for like 2 hours. They got quite a bit of content there, actually.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah.
So I don't know when that's coming out, but we talked about all kinds of things. We talked about Muslim activists and scholars. Standing up for Islam versus standing up for the Muslim community. Talked about religion and science.
Who were you in conversation with there? Was it?
It was Kamal.
Okay.
Kamal, yeah. So,
he's a great friend of ours. We've had him on. Shout out to Kamal.
Yeah, so it was really good. It was really nice. In addition to other topics that we talked about. So we even touched a little bit on veganism and stuff like that. So that was pretty cool. But we recorded for 2 hours, a bunch of stuff, and that should be out in the next few weeks, I think.
Were they kind of surprised you were vegan or something? Because I know they're a bit how they go about portraying Islam. Like they try to portray me like.
Not really. I actually told him the title of the article that I released on this, the first article I released on. And he's like, "You gave it away in the title. Why are people upset?" Yeah, and I was like, "It's because you actually read something, and people don't read. They just react. They see something, trigger words." And then they just have this knee-jerk reaction to them, and that's it. And when you probe it further, you find out, they actually didn't read the article. They didn't listen to the podcast about it. They just have a reaction because of the stereotype they have about it. And that's it. So when I just quickly explained it, it made perfect sense to them. There's nothing that I said that was nonsensical, that was beyond the pale. That's really the case with that. So...
Because you did like a podcast on veganism, and I remember back, you talked about Eid, how some Sahaba didn't actually sacrifice.
Like Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, when he was asked about that, he said, "I didn't want people to think that it was an obligation, because they started to think that it's become obligatory. That if you don't slaughter on that day, it's as if you're sinning or something." Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu used to just send his servant and just buy some meat. And distribute it to the poor, because that's really the whole intent of this, is to give opportunity to those in poverty who can't afford to eat meat to eat meat. That's one of the means of it. So it's not a. But now you talk to Muslims about it, and it's not just about slaughter. It's almost like part of like a farida or something. Like every day you have to have chicken for lunch, and you have to have some sort of red meat for dinner, and you have to have your sujuk at breakfast. It's like it's part of your identity as a Muslim. And if you go outside of that, then there's something wrong with your Islam.
I think we sort of associate, a lot of Muslims associate veganism with like another Western fad. Like, they're always coming out with new things.
Yeah. If you look at the article includes hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, narrations, verses of the Quran, accounts of the biographies of some of the
you come from a
companions.
totally different perspective. That's the thing, yeah.
And I just addressed it from it's like a holistic, that article is really about relinking the legal with the ethical. Because in the Islamic tradition, there's no distinction between the two.
Yeah.
The legal and the ethical are one and the same. And what we've done is we've separated the two, and so we just talk about the legal. Is this thing halal? Well, I can legally show you that, okay, you fulfilled all the conditions for it to be halal, but is it ethical for you to consume something that lived a life of suffering, that witnessed all of its brethren getting tortured and killed, as far as it's concerned, because they're getting slaughtered, and in a state of anxiety? I mean, one of the things I mentioned in one of the videos that we talked about there at One Path was, how come, one of the questions he asked was, how come Muslims will stand up for Muslims as a group, but then when it comes to Islam, all of a sudden it's crickets. You don't find anybody talking. And the reason for it is actually told to us in a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he says that when he describes our state as غُثَاءٌ كَغُثَاءِ السَّيْلِ, we'll be like scum on top of the ocean. And when the Sahaba say, well, what is it then? Why are we like that? And he ﷺ said, it's because you fear death and you love the dunya. Well, why do you fear death and love the dunya? Where is that state of being coming from? We can talk about riches in the world and gaining things and forgetting about the akhirah. That's one aspect. But another aspect is you're eating a lot of food that is generated from animals that experience states of anxiety and fear of death. And you're consuming that now, and it's becoming part of your being. So now you're in a state of anxiety. So watch out.
That's what I just gathered from...
Just on that point, Sheikh Hamza, I was listening to a lecture, he mentioned something about, some scholar said, you take on the attributes of what you eat.
Exactly.
I'm not sure if that's in the hadith literature or a saying of the scholar, but that's why we're prohibited from eating carnivorous creatures, that sort of thing. And even like things like camel, like you should restrict it, and beef as well. Yeah,
it's not just eating meat these days anymore. It's almost like people are crazy about it, and I've experienced this in my life. It's like I'm actually a proper
yourself. Yeah,
it's like a meat addiction, though.
Yeah, it is.
It's like when you don't have meat, as soon as you see someone walking like with a steak on their plate that's steaming, it sends off something in your brain. I mean, that's during.
Umar al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu said, "إياكم وضراوة اللحم فإن له إياكم اللحم فإن له ضراوة كضراوة الخمر." It has an intoxicating quality. Meat has an intoxicating quality or an addictive quality similar to that of alcohol.
Wow.
So and actually we know that. I can't remember the name of the compound that's in it. The name escapes me right now. But there's a chemical compound in meat that triggers the same areas in the brain and has an addictive quality similar to that of alcohol. So the more you consume of it, the more you'll be attached to it. And when you look at where it came from, you cannot tell me with the amount of meat that Muslims are eating today that we're not engaged in some sort of factory farming practices, because the only way for us to generate that amount of meat is to have factory farming.
Yeah.
Which means those animals are tied up, they're not grazing and pasturing out and about, and it means that they're witnessing their fellow brothers and sisters getting slaughtered, and they're smelling the blood. And so they're experiencing that anxiety and that fear. And then we consume that. Because why? Somebody said Bismillah Allahu Akbar before they did it. So you fulfilled the legal aspect of this stuff, but you've removed the tayyib from it, the pure. And the Prophet ﷺ prohibited against the torture of animals, against tying animals just for the sake of slaughtering them. In other words, there's actually a prohibition against treating animals as inanimate objects. They're still living beings, some of which spoke to the Prophet ﷺ and complained against their owners for the burdens that they were being placed upon them. And he ﷺ goes and speaks to the owners. It says, like, take it easy on them. So it's like we have to have a holistic understanding. And that's really what that whole thing with the veganism and people getting, this knee-jerk reaction, they didn't read it. Because if they read it, they would not have that reaction. It's a completely reasonable position to take. And you can talk, we are so selective. Oh, he ﷺ really liked the shoulder of lamb. He had a favorite part of the lamb and he ate chicken and whatever. That's great. How often did he do it? I'm not disputing that he had a favorite part of the lamb, but I'm asking you, how often did he do it? Aisha radiallahu anha said that we would go for 3 months sometimes. No smoke would come out of the house. Are you able to do that? You want to talk about the sunnah? The shoulder of the lamb? Fair enough. We're in September? Alright. September, October, November. December is when you get to eat it. And from now until December, you get to not do that. Are you able to do that? You want to talk about the sunnah? We're so selective with this stuff. Like, oh, it just fits my own desires and whims and what I like. And then somebody comes and just points that out to you and you have this knee-jerk reaction and you don't like it.
Like, that reminds me, this was at work, and there's this, like, at work, there's this lady, and she's into, like, the fitness, eating healthy, organic type person. And then she was speaking to the manager, and she's like, oh yeah, I buy all this organic food and this, that, and I know all this health, and I keep myself healthy. I don't do use mass production kind of meat, all that kind of stuff. And then the manager's straight up like, how do you know it's organic? Just because it says its label? And she just shut up. She was like, oh man, there's like, how do you know, like, who actually goes and checks if it's organic? How do you know? Like, they charge like a $10 extra. They make more profit just because they have organic written, but you don't actually know. Like, it's like business. But I don't know. You could correct me if it's true.
I mean, as far as I understand it, you can't just do false advertising. So somebody could come at you and take you to task if you're doing a false advertisement like that. The question should be asked was, what are the standards that make something organic? And I think the issue is there are really no standards. And so people are just able to say whatever they want about it.
Dr. Ghilan, just to sort of switch gears and get into the meat of what... that was meat. Nice. That was not intended. Just get into the meat of what we wanted to actually talk to you about today. Just to go back to your specialties in science and of religion and about debating atheism, that sort of thing. So one... key point that Tanzim, myself, and Raf wanted to ask you was, so for people who don't believe in God, right? For atheists, their perception of reality in particular, like when things happen in their day-to-day life, they think that it's they attribute it to chance, that there is no further hidden meaning behind this. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
And they have their self-help books or their ways of viewing the world that sort of helps them deal with that. It'd be like, look, nothing is permanent. Those new like the subtle art of not caring, that sort of thing.
the subtle art of not
giving an F. Yeah. So that's pretty much coming from a atheistic perspective, not a liberal perspective of how to deal with all the changes and random things that happen in your life. But as Muslims, we obviously believe that there's a hidden meaning and there's a divine play going on within the events that happen in our lives. So how do we sort of justify that direct presence of God in our lives? Because that's the thing that a lot of atheists fall back on, or people who just don't care about religion. They're just like, obviously nothing serious is happening. This is just random and it's just happening to my life. Do you get what I mean? As in, what perspective?
Are you asking like, what do you say to the atheist, or what do you say to the Muslim?
What do you say to the atheist?
What do I say to the atheist? The very statements that they're making then are nonsensical and are out of chance, and I don't have to pay attention to them.
Oh man,
you could do that, but
but that's the point. Like, if you're gonna say that there is no meaning and there's no purpose and all of this is happening by chance, that's what you're saying, right? That means everything you just said also has no meaning, no purpose, and it's happening by chance.
Okay.
So therefore, you said nothing.
This is too philosophical.
Going on to the level of, like how they debate you, like how we impose meaning on things that happen in our lives and events, but they say there is no further meaning beyond that. Do you get what I mean?
I get what you mean,
Yeah.
but what I'm trying to turn your attention to is with the atheists, when they make that statement, it's just a simple matter. You don't have to go down the rabbit hole with them. This is, I think, the problem with a lot of...
They take a lot of issues and bring it up as if it's like such a big deal, but you're saying to just not engage?
What I'm saying is not so much no engage. It's dismantle, like expose, call the emperor naked because the emperor is naked.
Yeah.
I don't have to engage in a lengthy discussion and debate when the foundational paradigm that you're using itself is self-defeating.
Yeah.
Right? So he's saying there's no meaning to any of this.
Yeah.
Which entails there's no meaning to what you just said.
It's not true though. If you think about it, I've never met an atheist who doesn't attach meaning to something.
That's the point.
It's just what they attach
exactly,
meaning to.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
So when they say we're imposing meaning, you just arbitrarily impose meaning on what you said, which in a sense is kind of narcissistic because you're saying what you say has meaning and nothing else has meaning.
Rafael's a case study because he's an ex-atheist. So,
so he knows all the arguments inside out.
But
that's
but I hope that makes sense to people. Like it's just, I think the problem is people go down the rabbit holes of, science and religion, for example. Yeah. That's one of the things that we talked about earlier at One Path. People think it's like, is science and religion, are they compatible? It's like, let's put that aside for a second. It's not a debate between science and religion.
Yeah.
This is not the conflict. The conflict is between iman and kufr.
Yeah.
The conflict is between belief and disbelief. That's what it is. And what the guy that says to you or the girl that says to you, science is the answer to all of this stuff and that's the way, what they're actually doing is they're kind of sneaking in assumptions underneath and they're just assuming you're going to go along with them. And the second you engage in the discussion, you've accepted their assumptions and you're going to lose. Their assumptions are quantity and quality are one and the same. Their assumptions are that philosophical naturalism is the only way to understand reality. And so when you engage in the process of science versus religion and go down that rabbit hole, you're going to lose because you're now going to talk about details about something that both of you already agreed on.
Yeah.
So in kind of a weird twist of fate for you and an ironic twist, you've accepted an atheistic worldview. If you engage in the discussion further, you have to go back and just peel these layers out and just say, like, let's just talk first of all about quantity versus quality. You want to tell me that oxytocin released in my brain and dopamine released in my striatum and sodium and potassium ions going through my ion channels in my limbic system at certain patterns, that equals me loving my spouse or my mother or my father or my sister or my son or daughter or whoever. That's equal to love. All of a sudden, having these ions, which are inanimate, they have no real intrinsic life to them. All of a sudden, that equals love or equals hate, by the way, because oxytocin is released in both contexts. Pleasure, when we talk about pleasure, this quality, it's a phenomenon. We're talking about phenomenology now.
Yeah.
The pleasure, the experience of pleasure, it's correlated with dopamine, but it's not necessarily with everybody.
This comes back to the classic question of how does cognition arise?
Cognition, intelligence. You want to tell me intelligence is just a bunch of sodium ions running through?
How do you translate the science or the chemical play in your mind? No, in your brain, in the neurology, into like actual.
Well, their idea is that quantity equals quality. These two are.
And is that pretty much the definition of pure materialism?
That's it. Yeah. And so you have to tackle that first. It's like, can you justify that for me, please? Because there are examples of case studies, clinical cases of people who do not have these structures in their heads. They were born with certain congenital disorders.
Yeah.
Example of that. There was a case out of China. Cerebellar agenesis. Literally didn't have a cerebellum. Went into the hospital, not because she walked into the hospital.
Yeah.
And it found out that because she had a cold that she couldn't shake off. They do a scan, a CT scan, and wait a minute, you're missing like 75% of your neurons.
But she was living her life as usual.
She was like 24 years old with a kid and just living her life usually. So when you look at these things, like we're looking at correlations, not causations.
Yeah.
And you can't equivocate between the two and just assume that, by the way, for those who don't understand, equivocate, it means to just assume that one word means exactly the same thing as another word. So you can't equivocate between quantity and quality. And when you engage in these discussions, you have to peel out all of these things. And then, by the way, religion and science, you want to tell me that your knowledge of the material realm, which is limited by your experience because you've only measured so many different things, and also limited by your technological advancements, because we today, with electron microscopy, are able to see things that people back in the day with light microscopy weren't able to see, and people before light microscopy weren't able to see yet still, right? So as technology progresses, it reveals for us different elements of the material realm, and yet you're saying to me that what I know today is the absolute truth and nothing but the truth, so help me know God, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
It's objectively true. But you know that in 50 years, when technology advances to another degree, they will come up to conclusions and findings will tell them that, wait a minute, those people 50 years ago in 2018, they thought things were working out like this, and now we know better.
So we can't take our knowledge to be ultimate right
it's
now.
It's provisional knowledge. It's ephemeral. It is not truth.
Yeah, right.
It's subjective, and it is relative to your time, space, experience, technological advancements. So that definitely is not how you get to any truth about anything. So for us as Muslims...
Oh, okay.
So
science is bound by all of those...
All of those things. So for us as Muslims, we should be promoting an instrumentalist view of science as opposed to a realist view of science. We're not realists. Science doesn't tell you real life and reality. It gives you... it's an instrumentalising force. It allows you to come up and discover certain patterns in the world that then you can utilize, instrumentalize as tools to advance yourself, to come up with cameras and to do these things. But that doesn't mean you understand reality.
And if you think about it too, if someone came up to you and said, "Oh, love doesn't exist," you don't actually feel that love, or you don't actually feel that hate, no one's really going to debate that. Everyone's going to say that's ridiculous. Love does exist. I felt it. That is a truth. The actual modality of that may not be known or unbeknownst to scientists, but we actually rest many of our points. And this leads into the whole idea of mysticism. On a truth, on a genuine experience.
Yes.
And these are experiences that every human being has.
I'll give you an experience that's material, even before you get into that one. A material experience. You sit in a surgery room and you see the surgeon, and something happens, and it's like do or die type of situation. Almost like, should I cut the blue wire or the red wire? And this patient we could lose the patient right now. All the algorithms can say one thing, but an experienced surgeon could decide to go against the algorithms. It could say like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go this way. And it could be something very dangerous. And you will find the interns and the junior residents, they will say like, that's not what the protocol says. We can't go like this. But this experienced surgeon with years of experience, experiential experience in the OR, has seen things that now he can't articulate, or she can't articulate. They can't tell you this is why. And then they end up saving the patient. And then you go ask him later, like, why'd you go by that way? I was like, I don't know. An example that people might know about that's more relatable. Sully, that movie with the airplane landing in the Hudson Bay. This is a real story. That pilot, the birds I think went into the engines and they stopped it, and so the plane was gonna just crash.
Yeah.
He calls the tower. They tell him take this turn, take that turn. He decides against all of the recommendations, and he decides to land the plane into the Hudson River in New York. Now, what people don't know about him is that he practiced for years. He had thousands upon thousands of hours in crash landings and dangerous situations and things like that. And he made this experiential knowledge calculation in his mind without knowing the know-how of it precisely, that I'm not going to be able to make it to the airport. I'm not going to be able to land it over there. I'm not going to be able to go over here. I have to land it into the water. And he used his experience. So that was experience he gained from doing things for over time. On a mystical front or a spiritual front, that's what Imam al-Ghazali did in Al-Munqidh min al-Dalal, deliverance from error. He recognized that these Sufis are talking about certain realities that I can't intellectualize and I can't speak about in a material sense. And they're related to practice. And the example he uses, which is a beautiful analogy, you go to the doctor, you're not a doctor. You may not understand what the doctor is telling you what to do, but you do it because this person is experienced. They have the know-how of it. You do it, you get better. You thank the doctor later. You may not understand the mechanisms, but you still thank him. You don't have knowledge of why it worked out like that way, but you recommend the doctor then. The Prophet is your spiritual doctor. The Sunnah is your medicine for the soul. The Quran is your guide. Whether you understand it or not is irrelevant. Doing it will get you to truth. And that's how you'll understand reality. And that's why the Quran begins with the first thing after you ask for guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first chapter is Al-Fatiha. What's the next thing after the Fatiha? You ask Allah, oh Allah, guide us to the straight path. And then there's a test to test your sincerity. After you ask for, because this first chapter is a Fatiha, as a surah, it's also a prayer. Alright, you want that prayer answered? There's a test to see if you're actually sincere. The test is Alif Lam Mim. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. Nobody knows what that means. So you have to say, I don't know what that means. But I ask for guidance.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right? And then once you pass past that point, if you get past that point, Alif Lam Mim, I don't know what that means. You're acknowledging your ignorance. I don't know. And then you say, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. Alright, if you get past that point, this is the book in which there is no doubt. What's the condition for you to experience that no doubt? لِلْمُتَّقِينَ الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. First, you have to believe in the unseen. That there is something greater and more than what you feel, touch, experience, and even those things. This table that we're sitting at is mostly empty space. From a quantum physics perspective, it's mostly empty space. It's just the bonds between the molecules that give the appearance of a solid and the experience of a solid. But if you get to the quantum level, you should be able to go right through this table.
Well, to go one step further, you mentioned the doctor example. Even the patient going to the doctor, you don't know if he's properly, trained in medicine. Yeah. Right? You have faith on that degree that's on the
You have faith that whoever gave him that degree, they know what they're talking about, and they believe that this person knows what they're talking about, and then you just go along with it.
But atheists won't acknowledge that. When he goes to God, they're like, oh, faith, oh, bro, like, I don't know, this, that. But then when it comes to doctors and their own mothers, if they're their real mother, it's like, they're fine.
Look, honestly, I think, we need to give acknowledgement to something that the atheists have a problem with, which is, it's a true problem. Religious people are the worst salespeople for the religion. I mean, we drive people away. I mean, Sheikh Muhammad al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, he said, in نصف الكفر في العالم, so that half of disbelief in the world, يحمل وزره متدينون, the weight of it is carried by religious people. بغضوا الله إلى عباده, that made Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala detestable to his servants. And so when the atheists, atheists or no atheists, our intellect as human beings is so powerful that it can fool us into believing that we are reasoning through something when in fact we're just rationalizing post hoc a decision we already made. You already don't like religion, so now you're going to justify it. And your reasoning power, your intellect is so powerful that you think you're thinking a priori, ahead of time, and coming to the conclusion.
Yeah. That's another thing we were going to raise. Like, rationality is not the end all. It can be wielded to different ends.
And you have to be aware enough of the workings of it to point out, am I justifying something I'm already doing and I already believe in, and I just want to continue the way that I live? Or am I actually seeking truth?
Yeah. You can question rationality itself as a sort of means to knowledge.
Depends on what rationality means, though.
Yeah.
It depends, yes.
Just if you're using it post hoc, like Dr. Ghilan said, like as in all your arguments are slanted a particular way. But would that lead to an inconsistency at one point, you would say? With like an atheist argument, for example?
You can only use reason in a very limited sense.
Yeah.
Very limited. Pure reason can only tell you the existence of God.
Yeah.
It can only tell you certain attributes of God that are necessary. But then after that, it requires revelation. Certain pure reason can also tell you whether you should believe somebody is a prophet or not. But that's it. Beyond that, it can't tell you anything more. It can't tell you can't arrive through pure reason at that there is a day of judgment, for example. You can arrive that there's death and we're all going to die, but beyond that, you need revelation to reveal that to you. Pure reason can't tell you about the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of 99 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That needs to be revealed to you. Pure reason can tell you that Allah has will, Allah has knowledge, Allah has power, Allah is one, Allah is unique, there is nothing like unto Him. These are things that pure reason can tell you. But beyond that, you are restricted by your experience of the world, and that's when empiricism comes into play to tell you. But then logic tells you when you're being incoherent with your reasoning, when you're having a justified appeal, when you're not. I mean, logic itself doesn't tell you truth, by the way. Logic is simply just a tool to organize your thought and show that are they coherent or not. But the conclusion at the end of it, you can have a perfectly coherent argument logically, and it can hold up to logic, but the conclusion can be fallacious.
That reminds me, there was an instance, you can correct me if I'm wrong, this story is like the Meccans when they did their own, tawaf, like the idols and stuff.
Yeah.
They justified that pretty logically. They said they would go naked and you could see everyone's private parts or whatever. And they would say that, it's because we're going back to our original state, and your original state, you don't come into this world with your clothes, on and stuff like that. That's why you have to do it naked. You get me? Like
their justification was these were clothes that we sinned
okay.
in, and so we're going to go in a pure state, and so that's they reason through it that way. The addition of the idols was also used through their reasoning thing was Amr ibn Luhay, he's the chief of Mecca, he's the most knowledgeable person, he's the scholar of the scholars here, and so he brought these idols, and so this is what makes sense, and so we're just gonna go along with that. And so that's when they started worshipping idols. He went to Sham and he brought Al-Lat and Al-Uzza and Manat, and he brought them in. He said, this is a good thing for you guys to, go around and to worship. And so they listened to him.
That's pretty scary. That's like literally a rationalization.
That's rationalization. This is just, and that's what I mean by when I talk about scholars and making sure that you have a healthy dose of apprehension, not to completely surrender yourself to anybody.
Yeah.
You always have to judge it based on the Quran and the Sunnah. That's revelation. Your reasoning has to be guided by revelation. And that's why I tell people you need to study.
Yeah. Dr. Ghilan, just quickly, before I lose you on the topic of science, we wanted to ask in a general sense, why is there so much hype about science in the modern world? Does it have something to do with, the modern world sort of depends on...
all of this. That's why. The cameras, the communication, the tools that we have, it's made the world into a small little village. The fact that I can take off from where I live now and just within 13 hours be back home. These are things were unthinkable in the pre-modern world. And so it's actually not science, it's technology. It's the application of science that has allowed us all of these luxuries of life. And so that's why there's a hype.
Yeah, because people use science as a justification, be like, oh, you can't see anything, therefore I'm justified to live however I do.
Yeah.
So science becomes this sort of reflex almost, to justify any lifestyle.
Look at it this way. Why did Musa alayhi salam get the miracles that he got? Why did Allah give Musa alayhi salam the miracle of turning the staff into a snake, putting his hand into his pocket and bringing it, or into his jayb, and then bringing it out and it's all completely white?
Yeah.
Why was that? Why did Isa alayhi salam have the medicine as his thing? Not medicine, bringing people back to life, healing the leper. Why were these the miracles of Jesus Christ, peace be upon him? This was because during the time of Jesus Christ, it was the physicians had the upper hand. They were doing miraculous things by healing people. And so he had Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him something that was truly miraculous. It wasn't just simply giving people medicine. It was actually bringing people back to life from death, which is something that medicine can't do. Broke the pattern for them. Musa alayhi salam, it was the magicians. These were the people that were having the power at the time. So what do we have at our age? Technology. Technology is the god of our age now. And so it's used to justify this adherence to science, and we basically exchange people in white coats, people in white robes for people in white coats.
Wow. White robes and white coats.
That's really what we have. We went from people in white robes to people in white coats. And these now are our clergy. If the scientist says believe, then we believe. If the scientist, and it's amazing actually, and we talk about science as a deity. Yep. Science says such and such. Look at the articles, the headlines of articles. Science says this, science says that. Science has discovered. It's who's the science guy? It's a bunch of people who are in labs, who are coming up to conclusions. And Imam al-Ghazali in his Deliverance from Error, as well as in his Tahafut al-Falasifa and Maqasid al-Falasifa, he says, look, there are many things the scientists say that we don't have a problem with. Our problem is when you step out of your realm. You step out of your role as a scientist, investigating with the material world, and you start to speak about the unseen realm, things that you haven't experienced, that you can't experience, that you can't even with your own rules, you can't even falsify. You can't even do a proper scientific experiment on. That's when we have a problem with you. But within your realm, go for it. And even within your realm, we'll tell you, we will use your models. We will accept the models that you have to the degree that they serve our purposes, technologically, for our benefit, things like that. We are instrumentalists. As Muslims, we have an instrumentalist approach to science. We will accept a model as long as it works. When it doesn't work, we'll discard it and accept another one.
That, see the perception of technology, people in the liberal society have put as a deity, right? Yeah. So then as technology progresses, you're like, oh wow, the world is getting better. But for as a Muslim, it's like the reverse. It's like the further away we were from the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the worse that we're getting. You get me? Yeah. So it's like different perception of reality altogether.
It is a difference. It's warping our perception of reality because we're now looking at our own creations, between quote unquote, our own manufacturings of things, and we think that we have taken control over nature. But all it needs is one single magnetic storm from the sun, and then all of this.
When you mentioned
gone.
that point, we're still beholden to nature almost. It's like if you read some of the modern philosophers, like the big name ones that come in the 20th century, like Theodore Adorno, Heidegger, they all comment on how science has pretty much destroyed Western society and civilization, how it's disenchanted us from nature. We have this one remove from nature, whereas where we sort of see it as something to exploit, as opposed to something the way to stand in awe of it.
The way a traditional Muslim would view science and the exploration of science would be, this is the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here.
Yeah.
And I would like to facilitate my life in this creation. And then they would approach the creation in a way that would facilitate that. An example of it would be what they did with the fountains in Granada. I mean, if you go through in Granada and they have these in Alhambra Palace, they have the way that the fountains are set up. It uses gravity. So imagine this: you pass by a fountain that is shooting water up.
Yeah.
In the modern world, we would make motors, and then we would use electricity, and then we would come up with some way to basically have this exploitation of nature in that way. Muslims, when they did it, was, well, how do we use gravity and elevations and so that we can get the water to use gravity to push the water up. So it's engaging in nature so that you're part of nature.
It's like a different logic you bring to your science, pretty much.
Modern science, Francis Bacon said it, it's to subject nature to our whim, to our desire, to our will.
Because Tanzim, we had our previous guest, Ahmed Garat, so he's a traditional Bosniak Ottoman archer.
Yet to be released, by the way.
Yet to be released. But he was talking about how when the Ottoman archers, they made their bows, they treated the tree in a specific way.
Yeah.
Where they got the bark from the side that was most exposed to the sunlight.
Yeah.
And they left the damp side.
Yeah.
In that process, they didn't destroy the whole tree. It could regrow.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they got their best sort of carve of wood.
Amazing. That's amazing.
Exactly, yeah.
But that's why I don't like this business of a lot of Muslims today. They'll point, look at the golden age of Islam. We came up with the scientific method. We're the ones who did this. I'm like, no, we did
it differently. Yeah.
We did different science. Our science was not done to destroy the world.
Yeah.
It's interesting too how you were talking about nature and how one magnetic storm from the sun can bring everything down. And as an atheist, it's almost like, because I lived in that world, there was
the case study.
Exactly, I'm the case study. No, you create, there's this world around you that's created for you. We have toilets, we have running water.
Yeah.
You don't need anything else. You have everything there. But we were talking about it before, the specific medical emergency I just had as a fluke one day.
Yeah.
That was unavoidable and it was out of my control. And it's almost like you can never escape. No matter how much you insulate yourself in technology, in all of this, falsity. And this is a metaphor as well for all physical matter, really. Yeah. You can never escape nature and you can never escape, reality.
Yeah, you're right.
I wanted to we talked about, we have this perception of our, the world around us. We're Muslims, alhamdulillah, I hope. And at the same time, the rest of the world is perceiving the world in a different way. And I wanted to kind of talk about, because this comes up with a lot of atheists, Allah created, a few Muslims and they're going to go to heaven and then majority of the world's population is going to Jahannam. how's that kind of just?
It's
because
questions.
like God is meant to be all merciful if He's created a hellfire for the disbelievers and He only created a few to go to Jannah. That's an unjust God. So, like, it seems rational, like we just discussed. What's your kind of
Islamic theological problems? One. Yeah. Just as a concise answer, or what could you say to alleviate like a Muslim's doubt?
Number one, you are not more merciful than Allah. Let's just start off with that. You are not more merciful than God. God is the most merciful, so He's got this mercy thing down packed. You don't have to worry about it. Okay. Number two, when it comes to I think the problem that we're looking at is we ignore the element of will. When it comes to belief and obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's an element of will, and will is not subject to time and space. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ tells us that if one of you intends to do a good action and does it, they get rewarded for it. And if they don't get to do it because they were prevented from doing it, they still get the reward for it. And when one of you intends to do an evil action and does it, they get the sin for it. But if they don't do it, they desist from it and they change their will, they get a good reward for it. Or if they get prevented from doing it, they don't get a sin recorded against them. So the element of will is actually outside of the action itself, the physical manifestation of it. When you disbelieve in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is an element of will. You get presented with a message and you say, I don't want to accept this. You've transcended time and space with your will. So the element of temporal existence, that I'm here for 60 years, 70 years and I've disbelieved and then I go to Jahannam forever. Well, your will to disbelieve is actually a transcendent thing.
But even like with the topic
that's that point.
Okay.
But the other point that I wanted to bring, which we bring all the time, you have to distinguish between the legal and the theological. The legal aspect of what is Muslim versus non-Muslim is different from the theological everlasting part. From the legal part, we have rulings that pertain to being a non-Muslim. Can't marry, can't inherit, all of these different issues that scholars discuss. Where you get buried, these are legal matters. So you distinguish between Muslims and non-Muslims for that sake. But for the theological part, scholars have have discussed this at length, and the best description of it, or the best categorization of it, is Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali's, at least in my estimation, and many scholars that speak about this. I'm just quoting them when I say that. Looking at non-Muslims, there's three categories. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. We were not going to punish anybody until we send a messenger. That's an element of Allah's mercy and justice. That He's not going to punish anybody until they get the message. So if people die and they haven't received the message, they're not taken into account in accordance to Islamic kind of categorization. What about people who get the message and actively they say, this is not something that we will believe in? They got the message properly and they rejected it. Well, Allah says these people are going to be punished. That's where the element of will transcending space and time comes into play. They've rejected Allah's message. What about people who got the message, like in our day and age, with all of this? People don't realize to what extent the campaign against Islam and distorting this religion has gone to. Even at our university, I go to the library. Let's say that I'm a non-Muslim and I'm looking into religion, and I go and look into the section on Islam. Yeah. Majority of it is Orientalist work that is bashing the religion. So you can't, it's not that easy. Technology, since we talked about technology, these algorithms used by Google and Facebook that create echo chambers and internet bubbles for people, where they don't necessarily get exposed to it. You think that you're in the age of free information and you can look up whatever you want. You know what? My Google search, if you and I do the same Google search, we will get different results because I look for different things than you do usually. That's just the nature of things, potentially. Unless we look for the same thing all the time and we follow the same stuff, we're not going to get the same page results.
Mine is food. Is it your food?
Yeah. That's definitely not going to come up. So mine is probably going to be something to do with powerlifting or something. So
We'll get the same results.
Yeah. We'll get the same results. So this is the kind of thing that, so you can't trust that people get the right message. And so it's basically the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to manifest with getting people, if they're sincere enough, who really want to find the truth. Allah will get them the truth. They will get to see it. And then finally, when it comes to this element of will and you decide that I want to disbelieve, there's an example I use that to bring the idea closer to people. Using a thing that people understand. Evolutionary biology, you have with the California fires that happen every year, there are plants that have evolved now, seeds, that do not germinate until there is intense heat and intense fire and smoke. Lots of carbon dioxide. That's what they need to see or experience for them to germinate. So that tree's progeny can come out. And then when the fire goes away, then that tree can grow. But then that tree's progeny is cut off until another fire comes about. In other words, that tree is not living and is not dead. In its ultimate existence, it's not alive and it is not dead. It needs the fire to go away for a moment so that it can grow. But then as soon as it grows, and if it wants to have its progeny come back again through its seeds, it needs another event of fire and smoke. That's the meaning of لا يموت فيها ولا يحيا. He does not die inside of this fire and does not live. Every time their skin changes, Allah changes their skin with new skin so that they can get punished with it again. And these are things that people don't find appealing to talk about. But there's a reason why you don't find it appealing. It's not meant to be appealing. It's meant to be really scary. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you there is grave punishment for the one who rejects him. You can't tell me. I find it really amazing. Like someone like Stephen Hawkins. People got really upset that when, how come you can't say, have mercy on him and stuff. You don't tell me this guy with all of his intellect spent his entire life to drive people away from Allah. And then you want to say, have mercy on him? I don't know what his state is with his Lord.
Yeah.
That's not my business. But I just look at the external appearance. You're looking at people that literally spend their lifetime using their magnificent intellects to drive people away from their Lord. And then you want to pray for them? Rest in peace? I don't really feel compelled to say rest in peace.
Just to sort of switch things up now and heading back into a more practical, tangible, day-to-day, how we live as a Muslim world. And I was wondering, in terms of navigating politics, we have Khilafah movements, we have all kinds of, different understandings of how Muslims should engage day-to-day in society. And I was wondering, perhaps generally and then more specifically, how do you think Muslims ought to ideally engage in society and contribute to, the kind of civic system we have?
Living in the West, obviously.
Particularly in the West, obviously.
Yeah.
I think you should engage to the degree where you will bring benefit to people. If you look at governance and the way that Muslim scholars in the past wrote about it, and, these people looking for Khilafah movements and stuff, scholars looked at governance, the form of governance, as a means to an end. The specific mechanism of how governance is done is really irrelevant. That's not the important thing. The form of it doesn't matter. We want a society where you can guarantee people's safety. You can guarantee their freedom to believe, as well as protect the religion itself from being taken out, protect life, protect wealth, protect progeny, families, stuff like that. How you decide this mechanism of the governance to be taken out, it doesn't matter. Early Muslim scholars, when they were living at the time when the Khilafah was happening, that was an age of empires and kingdoms. So the way that it manifested itself was the same way that it manifested in the world. Today we live in an age of nation states and unions between different states and however forms that they take. Yes, there was a period of time when there were some audacious philosophers during the Enlightenment period who did not like kingdoms and empires and wrote philosophical treatises, and they were insane enough to people to suggest that things don't have to be this way. So, we should have Muslims who theorize and are insane enough to think, if this is not working, why does it have to work this way? We can come up with, challenge the status quo, but challenge it intellectually.
Definitely.
Come up with solutions otherwise. And then on a practical front, the way things are functioning right now, I think we need to have more Muslims who engage in these spheres, because the fact is, there is no group that has advanced its causes except that it had engaged in real practical level especially at the local governance levels. You don't have to be the prime minister or the president, but you should definitely go for mayor, and you should go for governor, or things like that.
A lot of people would criticize that idea though and say the Prophet ﷺ never really engaged in the Meccan system when he was invited. I've heard this argument brought up many times when I've tried to advocate that.
It was stipulated. There was a stipulation. The Meccan system stipulated him abandoning his call, abandoning the message, discarding Islam. That was a stipulation. So he left it. That's why. Whereas here, is that a stipulation? I haven't seen that as a stipulation in the West. At least Canadian context, Australian context. Like, I haven't seen that being a demand of people. Like, you have to abandon your religion for the sake of this. So, what constitutes Darul Islam? Are you able to build mosques? MashaAllah, I've been seeing some amazing things in Sydney and in Brisbane. Like, you gotta be kidding me. If you think that you're not living in a place where you can practice your religion freely, you can build your mosques, you can have your halal food, to the degree that even non-halal restaurants are selling halal food because it benefits them economically. That's the strength of the Muslim presence economically here. You have everything you want. I mean, you can practice your religion, you can convert to it to become a Muslim, you can hold spiritual events, you can hold mawlids, you can do all of these things. What do you want? You can call people to Islam. Nobody's stopping you from doing any of these things. So what's the point here? I think there's a hidden kind of a desire of the ego to be in power. When people talk about khilafah and stuff, if the mechanisms and the things that are ensuring all of the objectives of Sharia are being preserved, and you're able to speak your mind freely, right? It's not like your people are commanding and demanding of you to accept certain things that are un-Islamic. Even if they are manifesting in society right now, you still have the freedom to speak against it and to call people to the higher way and to the straight path. What else do you want? You want to compel people? Is that the idea? You want to be in power so that you can act like a dictator? Is that the real deal here? Then just call it what it is. You just want to be a dictator.
I think it's like a lot of Western Muslims don't realize how good we have it here. Like, even in Islamic countries, you couldn't live and practice Islam in the same way we do here.
Man, there are people that are getting jailed right now, getting arrested, and they have nothing to do with political movements. They're literally just calling people to Allah and just like talking spiritual stuff. And just for that, making dua, and then they're getting arrested.
But some people would say, I know in the Hanafi madhab, you need to institute a khatib for Jummah prayers. You need like the khilaf, whoever is ruling.
Or like a lot of the fiqh tends to rest upon.
So they say you can't practice a holistic Islam.
I think that is part of, and this, I think we really have to reevaluate that type of way of reading our texts and remember the context in which our scholars were living in. You have to remember that they were living in, none of us, because we were born way past the time of the Khilafah and all of that stuff, our experience of the world is like a fish. A fish doesn't know that it's in water. All it knows is in water.
Yeah.
Right? So you live in a world where all you know that there's a Khilafah and there's a British Empire, and that's all you know about the world, and that's how the world politically functions. So that's how you construct your rulings, and even when you package your rulings, when you deliver your rulings, when you write about them, that's how you wrote about them in terms of I live in a khilafah.
Yeah.
So what you'll need to do now is to look at these rulings and repackage the way that, I'm not saying modify and change them. I'm saying وَمَا بَعَثْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ. Allah says in Surah Ibrahim that we have not sent a messenger except in the tongue of his people. And the Mufassirun, the scholars of tafsir, say about this verse, he's not talking about just simply Arabic language, English language, Aramaic language, or whatever. Allah is talking about the cultural expressions, the general milieu that they're in, the way that the turns of phrase, the things that are being shared, in the way that they're being expressed. All of that is in the tongue of the people. That also includes the political climate that you live in. Yeah. The way that things are being expressed. Express it in that way.
I think Sheikh Tariq Ramadan has said similar. Is like we need to reevaluate a lot of the fiqh in light of where we're living, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think he goes definitely to a bit of a
certain extent.
He goes to, I think, I don't know if he's placed a limit on it. I'm not as familiar with his work as I should be, to be honest.
Yeah.
But from the things that I've heard him say and the speeches that I've heard him, I haven't seen him give a clear criterion of when do we stop.
Yeah.
Because you have to remember something. Allah says about us in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ وَيَكُونَ الرَّسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا. That we have made you a middle nation so that you can be witnesses upon the people. So there's actually a responsibility for Muslims that we have to take the mantle of. We are the ones who bear witness and testify when things are going astray and when things are going right and whatever.
Yeah.
So you can't just, when I say that you have to repackage and things, you still have to do it with trepidation and be careful. Your compass, your moral compass is the Quran and the Sunnah. Don't confuse the mechanisms though. And don't confuse that for mechanisms. Don't confuse the mechanisms and the means for the ends themselves. The end that you're trying to serve is to preservation of the higher objectives of the Sharia, the preservation of life, preservation of wealth, preservation of religion, all of these things. How you go about doing that, these are mechanisms. Now you evaluate the mechanisms. Are you doing something permissible or impermissible in there? And is this something that the Sharia has spoken about unequivocally, or is this something that has been left to us to determine, to serve us as our time? You got to remember, during the time of the Khilafah and the way that and what there are fundamental qualities that differentiate between the current nation state and the encroachment on the individual lives and liberties that the Khilafah or the old age didn't have. And that has to do with technological advancements. Again, science coming into our lives and encroaching into our personal freedoms and controlling the way that we communicate, and the state now having access into our thoughts in ways that previous peoples never had. So there are a lot of things that we have to work through that we need to get. I think Muslims need to have a bit more himma, which is, how would you translate himma? It's like a bit more zeal or a bit more kind of energy to not have this business of, we live now in a time where they tell you have to specialize. You have to just do this one thing and that's the only thing you can do. I don't think so. I'm an insane person who thinks that that's not what you need to do. I think you as a believer, you need to connect with your scholars and your teachers and study the tradition and continue to study it and take this as a lifelong journey. And at the same time, go into your university and specialize in economics and specialize in political science or whatever field that you feel speaks to your heart. Take that field and then do a synthesis where you can come up with new creative solutions that are Islamically sound in that particular area that you feel passionate about.
Because that's why, at the moment, as I study finance, you can see that the way that, Muslim financial institutions, for example, are set up, it's just halalifying whatever's there.
Exactly.
And you're not going to solve anything.
That was actually one of the things that was brought up at the One Path studios today in one of the videos that we recorded. How can Muslims live in the world when the religion seems to restrict a lot of our activities? Because there's so much haram in finance, and how can you be a financial advisor or a finance person as a Muslim when so much of the stuff that's happening is impermissible? Said, Al-Haja al-Ikhtira'. Necessity has always been the mother of all inventions. Why do you have to think and approach the world in a way, it's got to be this way or nothing else? Otherwise, I'm restricted. You as a believer, come up with a creative solution.
One of my visions is make a marketplace for Muslims, the populations of Muslims in the world. You can make something digital for Muslims and make that space.
That's a great solution. So that's what I mean. Why can't Muslims come up with solutions like that, creative enough where they have the zeal to go after it and to come up with something that is so unique. Look at it this way. People thought it would be absolutely crazy. There is no way that people would rent a bed in their house for some stranger to come through and sleep there for a couple of nights. That is an insane idea. Who would want to do that? But there were a couple of guys who thought, some people would. Let's start an Airbnb. And other billionaires. Yeah. Every brilliant idea that came across that people thought was crazy.
Yeah.
And now the people who started are billionaires. Amazon. Bezos. Same thing. Who would order stuff online like that? eBay. All of that stuff started by people who thought, well, the way that things are working out right now is not convenient enough, or it's not working out enough. They're thinking from a capitalist perspective.
Yeah, we sort of applied the same thinking, but for how do we facilitate Muslims and our livelihood? Like, we need certain things in a halal way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
so we just create that.
You mentioned the example of Airbnb. Like, I do some consulting for that. It's like that idea is so insane because they don't own any capital.
Yeah.
And they're the largest group, like hotel.
It's such an insane idea. It's insane. So I want insane Muslims. I want Muslims to go insane and to just think, you know what? We have 2 billion of us. There's 2 billion of us. You want to tell me that you can't come up with a solution, given today's technology, like the one that you're just suggesting now, that would work for Muslims, that is ethically in line with the Islamic ideals? Yeah. We totally have it. I think the issue is we want quick solutions. We don't have long-term visions. Too many of us want quick riches, and the quickest way to get rich is to just engage with the system as it is right now. But the thing is, you can get quick riches by creating a new system. Yeah. If that's what you're after. But again, it's back to this idea of we need people that just go and look at the way things are and go like, why does it have to be this way? Yeah. It doesn't have to be.
Because we had a previous guest, he was telling us like the easiest way to get rich and successful in today's society is go through the nodal points of capitalism, which is through the corporate path or like climbing up the ladder, that sort of thing. Whereas for us to create a new outlet, new thing, it's a lot harder because we don't have the capital, we don't have the established institutions, but that's what
But this point that Tanzim just brought up is like Airbnb, no capital. Yeah. And it's insane. So we need people that go and look at the system right now and just think like of the possibility. I mean, every great technological revolution happened because there was someone insane enough to think that, well, why can't we fly? That was an insane idea. What do you mean fly? I mean, go back to pre-modern people and tell them that there's going to come a time where people are going to sit in aluminum tubes and they're going to go up 30,000 feet in the sky.
You know, there's another problem that you mentioned, you know.
They'll do an exorcism on you. They'll do ruqyah. They'll be like, 100%. Like, it's like your jinn came upon you or something. Like,
End of times.
Yeah, it's end of times.
You mentioned, you know, we're short-sighted, we want to get rich quick, all that stuff. But I think the other point, it ties back to exactly the first thing that I mentioned on this podcast today, was that, you know, people aren't willing to support. I'm serious.
Nice
like,
segue.
So this was an advertisement just to come back to the point.
So
donate.
We have, like, maybe there are ideas out there, but no one's backing it. I'm just saying, like,
ideas like
there's not that support to help them from, like, you know, a community as a whole. Yeah. That could be a possibility. Like, what do you think?
It could be, but I think if someone has enough tenacity, that's what I meant by himma. Tenacity.
Oh, tenacity.
Tenacity. If someone has enough tenacity, they'll make it work.
So you're saying boys in the cave, not, you know...
I'm not saying that.
Don't worry about the donations, inshallah, dua, this, that.
No, not that. No. I'm just saying that if you offer enough to people and you have a solution that enough people will find value in, that's the thing. You have to offer value. And so for Muslims, you have to offer a marketplace that gives them the value that they're looking for, with the quality that they're looking for, and now with the Islamic ideals and ethical paradigms that we have. Once you start to offer that, it's not just going to be Muslims. Non-Muslims are going to come at you and say, like, we want this. Because إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ إِذَا عَمِلَ أَحَدُكُمْ عَمَلًا أَنْ يُتْقِنَهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet ﷺ tells us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves that when one of you, does an action, that you perfect it. You don't just, quick, just put something together and just get it out there or whatever. No, you really spend the time to make sure that this is as perfect, and it's ihsan. Is what we're looking for, is ihsan. Excellence in the thing that you're doing. So that's what you have to do. Whatever it is that you're into, do it to the best of your abilities and try to inspire people to do more with it, and take an Islamic approach to it. And if you think Islam is restricting you, rather than this negative attitude of Islam is restricting me, go like, Islam is forcing me to be a creative person. Now I'm restricted in this way. This is the only space that I have to work in. What can I do with this? What amazing thing can I produce out of this? And you got to remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you in Surah Taha, ما أنزلنا عليك القرآن لتشقى. This Quran, this religion was not given to you so that you can suffer. So don't think I'm being restricted. Think I was like, how creative can I get now?
I need to copyright the marketplace ID, inshallah.
You've got too many listeners, so I was going to take it.
Like, this podcast is going to be 20,000 views. Going to be one guy's like, yep, taking that. But but I think had you for a bit, a bit too long actually, because you got a class, you're busy tomorrow, so I don't want to keep you too late, inshallah. But Jazakallah khair, Dr. Mohamed Ghilan coming on Boys in the Cave.
I have a nagging feeling that pretty much none of what you had in mind got covered today.
Yeah. But inshallah, like
most of it actually, yeah.
No, but not in depth. But regardless, like you don't live too far away, so inshallah we can meet up another time.
We got another retreat coming up.
We'll fly up to Bris Vegas.
Bris Vegas.
Yeah.
Bris Vegas.
There's so much going on, right?
The most happening place.
Either you guys come up, you can visit me in my humble home, or there's another retreat with Mizan Avenue.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
End of retreat happening?
Yeah.
End of September.
End of September. So I'll be covering Talbisu Iblis. This text, The Deception of Iblis by Abul Faraj ibn al-Jawzi.
Where's that going to be happening? In Brisbane? Or?
No, here.
Here, okay.
Yeah. Wow. So that's happening, inshallah, at the end of September.
Inshallah, we'll be
3-4 days, I think, or something like that.
I like that plug you just did.
So those who are available, they can come and just check Mizan Avenue for that.
Yeah, inshallah, and we're looking to do more conversations. We're in touch with you, so Jazakallah khair. We'll be with you in the next 2 days, inshallah. We were in that class. So we'll wrap it up there. So for our listeners, thank you for giving us your attention. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email us at boysinthecave@gmail.com or find us on Facebook. And you can follow our journey through Instagram. Please leave a 5-star rating on iTunes, as that greatly helps us. Even support Dr. Mohamed Ghilan on all these platforms and social medias as well, Patreon. Even after you've given us 5-star on Boys in the Cave, then give Dr. Mohamed Ghilan's podcast a 5-star rating, inshallah. So from our special guests, Dr. Mohamed Ghilan, Josh, Rafael, and myself, we wish you all the best. This is Tanzim signing off. Assalamu alaikum.